Oh, yes.
Welcome back, everyone. Today I'm very happy to bring you a review for the new Transformers Studio Series 86 Core Class Exo-Suit Spike Witwicky. This is the first and only new Core Class figure in the second wave for Studio Series. He ships with repacks of Shockwave and Ravage from the previous wave. And this is a new, fully transformable take on the Exo-Suit that Spike Witwicky and Daniel Witwicky pilot in the Transformers Generation 1 cartoon, as well as the movie, which is why he's labeled with the movie here. This isn't the first crack at a fully transformable Exo-Suit Spike. We did get one in Masterpiece that came with the original Masterpiece Bumblebee, aka the superior Masterpiece Bumblebee. I don't care what you say, come at me. So I'm very excited to see how the engineering has changed over the years, what the difference in scaling is, and what a current core class can give us in comparison to an old Masterpiece toy. With that said, if you've seen my reviews before, you know this goes. We're going to take a look at Spike's packaging, then we'll open it up, we'll check out the instructions, and we'll see Spike himself in both vehicle and humanoid mode, robot mode, I guess you could call it. Naturally, I'll be doing plenty of group shots and comparisons today, and then at the end of the video, I'll give my final thoughts. So Spike comes in what is now our standard Studio Series packaging. It's just a small open window box with a little peg flap here. So the peg flap allows us to see a full bit of artwork of Spike, and it does look very accurate to how he appeared in the movie. A little bit more painty looking, but you know, the details on his face and everything are pretty spot on. You can see the figure front and center here. Unfortunately, still, after all these years of making little human figures, no paint on the face. Still got that creepy Silent Hill flesh face thing going on. Why? Why can't they paint their faces? Like, they have painted the faces of, like, Micromasters and Minicons and stuff, but they won't paint human faces. I find that to be the oddest thing. Because his head is quite a bit bigger than, like, a standard-sized Micromasters. Really not sure what they're afraid of there. As I mentioned, you can see the Transformers the movie call-out. You can see his name down here at the bottom with his allegiance. On the side, you just got a close-up of his face in the artwork. Here, it's a little more zoomed out, kind of boxed in image with a black background. And then on the back, we get renders of the toy. Now, you might notice a big old crease right here where the flap meets the box. And that's because my youngest son got a hold of this thing before I reviewed it. So, yay for kids. Aren't they just precious? Okay, so we can see his, alternator vehicle mode right here, as well as the robot mode. He takes 11 steps to transform, which isn't too bad. Now, it looks like the blue is a lot paler and more gray than the final product. Final product's a little bit more like a sky blue color with some gray thrown in. I'm not sure which one. I kind of like the neutral colors of this more, just aesthetically, but I do believe these colors are actually closer to how it should look, so can't say it's really an issue. Nothing was lost. He also, and I mentioned this, comes with 2 blast effects to act as, like, booster flames or even weapon fire, because his hands can turn around into the little cannons like we saw in the movie. So that's pretty neat. And yeah, that's everything to see on the box. So let's go ahead and open it up. Okay, so we got our little instruction sheet here. You can see a nice render of Spike on the front. You got his name, the branding, all that. Open this up. First thing you get is how to configure him properly from taking him out of the package. This shows you how to swap his hands around to reveal his little, blasters up front, attached to blast effects. And then we get to the transformation from his humanoid form to vehicular. I really don't know if you call it a, robot mode or alt mode or not in this case, but close enough, right? So you get that. And then this shows you how to attach the blast effects to the back to give him, like a little turbo boost effect. There is one feature that the instructions don't cover, and I'll point that out when we get to it, but kind of weird they left it out. Alright, now we get Spike in his vehicle mode, and you can see it's just some 4-wheeled type of odd vehicle with rocket boosters on the back. These are the blast effects. Now, shockingly, these blast effects appear to be cast in actual hard plastic rather than the soft rubbery plastic of others. So, I don't know if it's kind of a one-time deal or if that maybe marks a change in the way they're doing them, and they might be hard plastic now, which would alleviate that issue of them stripping paint off of toys, so we'll have to wait and see there. But it looks pretty neat. The one big downside is that he is always looking down at the ground. He has no hinge where his head can look up and look forward, unlike the Masterpiece toy. So that seems like an odd oversight. I mean, he's really just looking at nothing, right? There's just a panel in his face, so I don't know. I guess you just have to ignore that, pretend it's not there. So that's maybe my one big hit against the toy, is the fact that His head just looks down in this mode. Now, he does have his fish showing in this mode, which I'm also not really crazy about. I mean, at this scale, I'm not, too surprised by it, so I'm not going to harp on it too bad. But it is a little unsightly. Could have gone without that. The one really good thing about this is it rolls very, very well. There's no dragging, clearance issues, none of that. Like, nice, smooth rolling on the four wheels. So I do dig that. And I think, for its scale and what it's trying to accomplish, it does a serviceable job of recreating that vehicle mode for Spike's Exo-Suit. Now we get a nice comparison with the other two transforming Spike figures that exist out there. The most recent one was the tiny little figure that came with the core class Bumblebee from Buzzworthy Bumblebee. And I mean, his transformation's kind of a joke. You literally just flip his backpack down and lay him on his face, so... he's a minifig though, so I'm not going to expect too much out of him. Then this one is the Masterpiece toy that came with Masterpiece Bumblebee. Funny how those two get paired together. Now, technically, this toy that I have is Daniel Witwicky. And that's because I have the Hasbro version of the Masterpiece Bumblebee. Because for some reason, between the Takara version and the Hasbro version, they changed Takara's Spike to Daniel. But they didn't change anything about the toy. It's, same figure, and can technically work for either one, just like, this guy can or this guy. But because this toy is unchanged from the Spike release, I'm just going to, show it here as Spike. And as I mentioned, this toy actually has a hinge on the neck where he can look forward while he's driving, and you can actually see where he's going. Oops. I also think that the vehicle mode is just much more, put together looking in this one. This, it looks obviously much better than this thing. It is actually transformed in some way. But look how just kind of sleek this is, right? It all just kind of comes together, one nice unified body. I think this one looks a lot better than this. But again, Masterpiece, core class, your level of engineering is just not going to be the same between these two. Now it's time to transform our Spike. Now for ease of transformation, I would recommend removing the blast effects for now. You don't have to take them off, but yeah, it just makes it a little bit easier. Okay, so the first thing you do is you pull his arms away from the hips. And you see they actually tab into the hips here with these little protrusions there. So you just kind of get them out of the way. Then you extend the legs out. So you kind of rotate them up. And then you bring the knees down to straighten the legs out. Separate the feet. Spin the knees around like so. Then we're going to flip his shoulders. Let's see. You gotta spin that around, spin this, and rotate it like that. Do the same thing over here. There you go. Alright, so you get a nice little humanoid form, and then you just turn the helmet 90 degrees. I don't think it matters, which direction, just 90 to where these panels are on the side so you can finally see his face. And that's it. That's a transformation. It's pretty simple, but, it doesn't need to be anything super complex. I mean, his vehicle mode was never really much of a transformation anyway, just him kind of laying down and moving around a bit. I'd say it looks pretty good. Now, unfortunately, they still haven't painted the face. After all these years, they still, for some reason, just don't paint the faces on these guys. I mean, he's big enough. He is plenty big enough they could have painted some eyeballs. Like, at least some eyes, right? Even some black dots, something. He looks like a Silent Hill creature. Which, I mean, I like Silent Hill, but, I don't think Spike's supposed to look like that. Alright, so his posability is really nice. His arms move up and down on hinges. They can move forward too, because of these rotating shoulders, so you can go up a bit, though you do get some clearance issues with the wheels on his hip skirt there. So I think I only raise them so far. He has a bicep swivel. These guys can rotate around to become the little blasters, and we'll get a better look at that here in a moment. There's no waist articulation, unfortunately, but he does have ball-jointed hips, which raise up almost completely. Go front and back really well. He's got knees, which are kind of technically double bend because of the transformation, though, I mean, can't think of a really good use for that. I guess you can do something like that. I don't know. He has no ankle articulation, but the ankles are molded in an A stance for dynamic posing, which is good. And then here's the thing that I mentioned that is not covered in the instructions, and it's such a weird omission. He's got this little lever on the back that you just swing back and forth to rotate his head around so he can actually look around. So it's a really, really nice touch. The Masterpiece toy, this helmet is actually removable, and you can just manipulate the Spike head manually, and that's how you get it to look up he works so much better as a Spike toy. And honestly, I think the proportions just look a lot better too. This one, it's kind of showing its age now, and it's a little goofy looking. Now, as far as the smaller figures, I'm not really even gonna, try to compare. They're much, much smaller toys. One of them, is a headmaster that's barely even an exosuit. So really, my main focus is these two. And I think it's safe to say that between them, our new Studio Series Spike has by far the best robot mode. I think his vehicle mode is better, the Masterpiece one. It's just more put together looking, it's less gappy, it's really nice, but that does come at the expense of the robot mode. And even though in a perfect world we get, both good vehicles and robot modes, I will always prefer the robot mode takes precedent. That doesn't mean they shouldn't try with the vehicle modes, because then we end up with abominations like Legacy Blitzwing. And yes, it's an abomination. Those vehicle modes are horrifying to look at, and the only consolation you get is a really clean looking robot mode. Honestly, I still think the Titans Return one does it better. But that's for another review at another time. So yeah, I think overall, since I do prefer robot over vehicle, I think this is the best Spike we've ever gotten. Or Daniel, whatever you want to consider it. Best exosuit. Before we wrap this up, I also want to show off the fact that this Masterpiece toy can kind of, sort of, also assume like a little battle mode. I don't even know if it's official or not. But basically, if you just spin the arms around and flip these up, kind of de-transform them a little bit, you do get something vaguely resembling the blaster mode, but you can see it's not nearly as good as this guy's, where he actually has like extended barrels that look like they're something, and it's not just, just boosters on the back that look kind of nubby and pointless. So again, just like the main robot mode, this guy easily takes the cake here. By far, my favorite exosuit figure. And this completes our look at the new Studio Series 86 Spike Witwicky. Overall, I have to say, I very much like this figure. I think it is my favorite of the Studio Series Core Class figures so far. Shockwave and Ravage were cool, but I don't know, they didn't really scratch that same itch for me. I mean, their alt modes were kind of especially Ravage's. I mean, his is kind of wonky too, I guess, because he's an exosuit, not a full-on Transformer. But I don't know, I feel like he's more fun. He's got great blast effects, and he just has a really nice shelf presence that I really admire. And like I said before, I think he's the best exosuit / Spike figure that we've received so far. The Masterpiece toy has its merits. I do think its transformation is, it's more involved and it leads to a better vehicle mode. But, again, it's all about that robot mode to me, and his, I think, is way better in every way. Aesthetically, posability, all that stuff. Really, really good figure. It has its faults. You can see he's got a big old massive hole in the back of his head, which, yeah. They've been doing that a lot with the Core Class figures lately. It's not as bad as Hot Rod's head, where, like the entire head is just empty space. The hole doesn't take up the entire back of his head like Hot Rod's. It's still unsightly, though. They could have at least painted that hole brown so it blended in better. He doesn't look up in the vehicle mode, which is also a shame. It would not have broken the bank just to, make this like a little two-piece thing where the head, hinges upward, and you can pop the helmet off, but whatever, that's what they went with. And again, the lack of painted eyes, but that's nothing new, so I can't really hit the figure too hard on that, because no other figure has done it so far, at least not an official one. So for what we get, and for the $10 to $12 or so dollars, I think is a good buy. He looks really good, he scales well with your toys, really, really just kills it on a Studio Series 86 shelf. And again, can double as two different characters. You can buy two of these and say one is Daniel, one Spike, because the exosuit's going to be the same. Now, naturally, Daniel's head would be a little bit smaller than Spike's, but, the scaling is not going to be noticeable enough at this small size. Even if they made this toy and, gave it a new head that was, more child size, it would be barely any different. Plus, imagine how bad the detailing on the face would be then, if it got any smaller. So yeah, it really has some potential. It's kind of like a mini army builder, army of two. I do wonder if, because Hasbro likes to get multiple uses out of a mold, if we'll see this guy possibly redone as Daniel in the future, and how that would look. Would they, alter the colors in some way, a la like the 86 sweeps? Maybe just tweak the blue a little bit, put it, closer to more of that deeper blue. Maybe change the head, but probably not. I can see that happening, being like a quick repaint, especially if it's part of a multi-pack. See, I think a standalone might be a tough sell, because it is a simple figure, and just altering the hue of like 1 or 2 colors probably won't be, a great selling point. But if you sell him in maybe like a Bumblebee 2-pack, right? I mean, why not? Like, we could get a Studio Series 86 Bumblebee with like the proper Volkswagen Beetle mode and sell it as a 2-pack with Daniel, because it makes sense to have him with a Spike or Daniel character. So I can see that happening, and I would definitely imagine that there'd be at least some slight deco tweaks. Maybe nothing major, maybe just enough to say it's a different toy, maybe nothing at all. Maybe they'll have the same exact toy and call it Daniel, who knows. So I think it's a fun toy, and I would not mind seeing it reused as a Sun, especially if it gives us something cool, like a proper yellow Volkswagen B. Of course, time will have to tell there. So yeah, I personally think it's a great figure. I think it's well worth picking up if you're a fan of the movie, Generation 1, anything like that. Or even if you just want a fun little toy to play around with. He's a good desk toy, poses very well, looks really cool. There's little, fire blast effects going on there. So I think if you pick him up, it'll be worth your money. Of course, that is just how I feel about this toy, so now I want to know what you all think of him. Do you agree that he's a cool looking figure? Do you like the way he came out in robot mode and vehicle mode? Or do you not want this for some reason? Maybe you're not interested in like non-Transformer characters. Maybe you don't like the way he looks. Do you think the Masterpiece one is better? Do you think a third-party one is better? Any and all feedback is always welcome in the comments section. If you enjoyed this review, make sure to toss it a like. Let YouTube know you want to see more stuff like this. If you do want to see more like this, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you always get a heads up when I post something new. I thank you for joining me for this very, very cool look at the new Transformers Studio Series 86 Core Class Spike Witwicky. And with all that said, I will see you next time.